Happy Friday, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Common Knowledge, the show where I take a look at 10 common Magic the Gathering cards and tell you if they're any good in the Pauper format or not. Let's get right on it with Gideon's Lawkeeper, a single white mana for a 1/1 human soldier. You can pay a white and tap it to tap target creature. Tappers. We don't mind tappers around here. This isn't bad. This seems pretty good. You know, I always gotta look back at my classic tapper example of Master Decoy. Love this guy. And this guy's a 2-mana 1/2 that has the same text. So he comes out a lot later. And one extra point of toughness, how much does that really help you? I guess it gets you out of Electricity range or Lava Dart range. Not even Lava Dart range because they could just use it twice. So as much as I like Master Decoy, maybe it's just the zebra, although I also really like this art too. Gideon's Lawkeeper seems better. Seems better. You put this out on turn 1, and now you can start tapping things down on the next turn. Not that you really have anything super dangerous to worry about tapping on turn 2, but just the fact that now it's out there, you're ready for whatever the opponent has to bring in. I kind of like it. It's a soldier. It's a human. Those are good creature types potentially if you have a deck that needs those. But overall, I just kind of like the package that we're getting here. Now, what deck does it go into? I don't really know. You know, maybe a soldier's deck, I suppose, could use this, but I don't. What is this really going to target? I guess that's a better question. It can target your Gurmag Anglers or your Cryptic Serpents. You probably don't want to pay 3 mana, and by paying the 2 mana ward cost to put this on to tap a Tolarian Terror every turn, that seems a little expensive. But maybe decent against Monstertron to be able to tap down some of those big guys. It is kind of just a 1-for-1 thing though, and white can go so wide that white can go so wide and can go so aggressive that you probably don't really need this in your arsenal. But this probably is one of the best tappers we've seen on the channel, and I do want to give it a little bit of credit. And there is potentially stuff you can do. You know, white has all sorts of destroy target tap creature things in white, and this is a way of tapping a creature down and then being able to kill it. That's okay. This is okay. I'm not excited by it, but I do like it. And that'll get it. I think we can give this a 2.9. I think not quite a 3, but I think it's pretty solid actually. Cool card. Undergrowth Leopard is 1 and a green for a 2/2 cat with vigilance, and you can pay 1 and sacrifice this creature to destroy target artifact or enchantment. I played a lot of these during Tarkir Dragonstorm Limited, which wasn't that long ago. And this was just a solid card. You know, a grizzly bear that has vigilance and has the ability to sacrifice itself at instant speed and take out a problem permanent. Target artifacts or enchantments. That's pretty darn good. This stays aggressive if you have really creature-based plans, and in green, you know, with Winding Way and Lead the Stampede, it's kind of nice to have this option available to you. I like the vigilance, so it can work on an offense and then still block on defense. Not only block, but block and then potentially sacrifice itself to its ability. So you're getting a whole lot of extra value out of it. I think this is a really solid card. It probably is more of like a sideboard piece in a green deck that just wants to play a ton of creatures, but also wants to be able to take out problem permanents. But it's not a bad one of these. You know, it's if Grizzly Bear's a 2, Undergrowth Leopard's like a 3. No, it's even higher than that. This is way better than the tapper we just saw. Like I'll go for like a 3. I'll go for a 3.3. I think Undergrowth Leopard is a really good card. It was really great in limited, but I think it still has a lot of work that it can do. I would say probably the closest card I can think of is another relatively new card, and it's Curious Farm Animals from Avatar here. But this is a 1/1 that can sacrifice itself for 2 to destroy an artifact or enchantment. So you're paying the same mana cost: 1 to get on the board, 2 to sacrifice, 2 to get on the board, 1 to sacrifice. So they're pretty similar cards. I mean, this does give you the 3 life when it dies. But and you get it on turn 1. I guess that's also potentially useful to you. But also just being a 1/1, this body doesn't do a heck of a lot. Whereas if your opponent has no creatures, then this being able to go in and attack, or if they have a small creature or something, this being able to continue to attack and put on pressure is not a terrible idea. Curious Farm Animals does get played every once in a while in some sideboards in white decks. And I think Undergrowth Leopard could probably do the same. And again, I think green is just more equipped to play higher creature-based decks, knowing that you have Winding Way and Lead the Stampede. And this is a good way of getting your naturalize effect out of something that is still a creature. That's, you got like Restoration Sage or whatever. Restoration Sage is uncommon, right? Have we got a Restoration Sage in no, not Restoration, Reclamation Sage. That's what good, it's fine. It's been a long day already. Reclamation Sage. Yeah. And yeah, that's not legal in Pauper, which is wild. This should be legal in Pauper. But yeah, like this is I think you could make the argument that the Leopard is just better than this. Like, yeah, this is an Inner Trigger, so you're always going to get it, but having this thing at instant speed, ready to go, being able to still attack with it, 2 defense to keep it alive, I don't know. Also cheaper to cast. I guess this is a pretty solid card. I like Undergrowth Leopard. Yeah, I think, what did I say? 3.3? I'll stick with that. I think that's a good score for a good card. Next up is Cruin Striker. Yeah, Cruin Striker. Yeah. I wasn't playing during Avacyn Restored. I don't know how to pronounce his name. Cruin Striker is 1 and a red for a 2/1 human warrior. Whenever another creature you control enters, this creature gets +1/+0 and gains trample until end of turn. That's interesting. So if you find a way of putting a ton of creatures on the board at once, this guy can swing in for a pretty decent amount. He'll probably trade at that point, but with the trample, maybe something will hit over. It does get the gears turning. I know exactly what deck I would want to put this in, like some kind of Impact Tremors, Eldrazi Spawn style deck, that would be Gruul based and playing Nest Invader and Brood Birthing, and there's a ton of other cards that you could think of that fit into that. The Raphael Tough Turtle would probably go in that as well. That deck isn't really a thing because Gruul Ramp is just so good. So if you're already playing Gruul, you kind of just play that instead. And Gruul Ramp is pretty darn similar to a sort of Gruul Eldrazi deck, but it wouldn't play this because it doesn't need to. Yeah, you can cast Writhing Chrysalis and get 3 bodies on the table, and then this guy becomes a 5/1. That's 5/1 with trample for a turn. That's pretty cool. But at the same time, you could probably just do better stuff with your mana than this. You would ramp up on turn 2, be able to cast that Writhing Chrysalis faster, and then just win the game with that. You don't need this guy at this point. He's fun. I do like him. I think he's got a cool shtick to him, but I don't think he's really cracking into any of the decks unless you can have like some crazy burst of creatures. Maybe it's possible, but I don't really think so. I think we can go for a 2.7 on this guy. I'll bump it up to a 2.8, but that is kind of the ceiling for him. Phyrexian Gargantua is 4 and double black for a 4/4 Phyrexian Horror. When this creature enters, you draw 2 cards and lose 2 life. That art's fine, but that's my boy right here. Look at that. God, that Apocalypse art rules. I remember as much as I loved the art on this card, I remember just thinking this didn't feel good to me to play back in the day. Now, back in the day, I was not a good Magic player, and I probably still am not today. But 4 and double black, so 6 mana to get a 4/4 that draws you a couple cards and loses you a couple life. I'm sure back in the day, like high school me would have gone, I have to. What do you mean? I paid six mana, 6 whole mana, and you're making me lose 2 life? That's ridiculous. And part of me still feels that way. That does seem a little ridiculous to spend that much mana and still have to lose some life in the process. But 2 cards is a good amount of cards. And Enter's Trigger means this can do all sorts of blinky shenanigans and continue to draw you even more cards, and that's pretty cool. A 4/4 body is fine. It's not great. You'd really want it to have 5 power to be able to tackle with the other big threats in the format, like the ones I've mentioned before, Gurmag Angler, Cryptic Serpent, that kind of stuff. But still, a 4/4 body that draws you a couple cards, you probably don't mind the life loss. This isn't bad. This just isn't a bad card. It's just not a particularly great card. I think this is something that's perfect for a cube or like something really underpowered in that way where you can build things to your own desires, but I probably not here. And it's a shame it doesn't have like a retro frame but old border or but white border. I would put this in my white border cube in a second, but my white border cube stops at 7th edition because I don't want the modern framing here, and that's too bad. Yeah, I don't really like any of these. Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of these other arts. Like you had it. You nailed it in one. I don't know why you had to mess with things, but yeah, Phyrexian Gargantua is a pretty classic Magic card. Not a particularly great Magic card, but still a pretty good one. From a Pauper perspective, I don't think this would really see any play, and it really shouldn't. But I still want to give it a halfway decent score. I'll give this a 2.5 and acknowledge its usefulness in Magic history. Dive Bomber, 3 and a white for a 2/2 bird soldier with flying. You can tap and sacrifice this creature, and it deals 2 damage to target attacking or blocking creature. That's not great. I was about to say fine, but it's not even fine. It's just not particularly great. 4 mana for a 2/2 flyer is in white is not good. We can get much cheaper flyers on the board. And sure, it does have a removal mode, but that removal mode requires you sacrificing the creature. We don't do damage on the stack anymore, so you can't. You're not really getting to be able to do 4 damage with this thing. You used to be able to do that at one time, but that's not the case anymore, and it really makes something like this not nearly as good. And also, without having vigilance on it, you're having to make this choice of, do I swing in for the 2 damage because I'm a flyer and I've got evasion, or do I hold this up so then I can tap it and sacrifice it to deal 2 damage to an attacking or blocking creature? And that's a bad choice to me. I mean, both of those things are fine, but having to make that choice is kind of ridiculous. If this was a modern card, it would 100% have vigilance, and it would probably have a lot of other changes too. But the vigilance, I think, would be the first one to going to making this card slightly more viable. It would still be a bad card, but it could be more viable. Let's go with I'll just go with a straight 2 on that one. 2.1. I'll throw it above. Bloodpire Elemental, 4 and a red for a 4/1 Elemental. It has sacrifice this creature, deals 4 damage to target creature, activate only as a sorcery. Well, okay, I guess this is a halfway decent comparison to the card that we just saw. 4/1 means it's probably going to trade with something if it does block it, or if it attacks and gets blocked, it's probably going to trade. Again, 4 power is not 5 power, and that matters in this format. Being able to sacrifice itself to deal 4 damage to a creature is nice. You are kind of spending 5 mana to do that, although I suppose if you've cleared the board, maybe you can swing in for 4 points of damage a time or two before you do that. But the sorcery speed, look at activating only as a sorcery, I think makes this terrible. And I don't understand why it needs that. Why is that? Why is that useful? Or what use does that have to the design? I'm wondering. Because the idea would be, you don't want, because you wouldn't want this thing to be able to sacrifice itself and deal damage to target player. I understand why you wouldn't do that, because you could you could block with it and stop a bunch of damage coming to you, and then deal 4 damage to the opponent's face. I get why that would feel a little awkward, but when you can only do the damage to a creature, I don't think that's a big deal. Again, and I'm almost positive. Correct me if I'm wrong. I thought the damage on the stack thing was pre current border, pre modern border. So this isn't like a damage on the stack thing either, to my knowledge. Correct me if I'm wrong on that one. I don't think it is. So I don't understand why this has to be activated only at sorcery speed. And it just makes the card a whole lot worse. And I don't think it really needs to be a whole lot worse. It would still be just a normal kind of bad card if it was at instant speed. But now it's a really bad card. And I don't know why. Why would you do that? We'll go for a 2 point. I almost kind of like the bird better than this. I'll just give it the same score. I think it's a 2.1. Next is Dark Heart of the Wood. Golgari mana, black and a green for an enchantment. You can sacrifice a forest and you can gain 3 life at instant speed. This was originally from the Dark, and one of the earliest Golgari cards before Golgari was even a thing. We had a card that was in Golgari colors, and then they brought it back with Ravnica when Golgari became a thing. So that's kind of cool. I like both the arts too. This is, the easiest thing to compare this to is Zurin Orb, which itself is a pretty classic Magic card from all the way back in Ice Age. Boom, nailed it, Ice Age. And you can see it's relatively expensive for these copies. Although you can get, well, I was gonna say you can get cheaper copies, but no, you really can't. That's a decently priced Magic card. This is an uncommon though, not available in Pauper, but this has, sacrifice a land, gain 2 life. Also costs 0 to play. That's probably the most appealing thing about Zurin Orb is it's free to play. Dark Heart at least is costing you 2, and now narrows to make you sacrifice forests, which it kind of defeats the purpose a little bit, or I guess this helps balance it if you want to go that route. It helps balance the card that, yes, you are paying black to put this on the field, so you probably don't have all forests, but now you can only sacrifice forest to gain the life. I guess that balances it in some way. I think it makes the card really bad. But I like the art, and I like the idea, and I like Zurin Orb, and I like things that make me think about Zurin Orb. So I don't think it's particularly good. We'll go for a. I'll go for a 2.3. I really don't like sacrificing my lands unless I'm getting a huge benefit out of it, and life gain I would not say is a huge benefit. Now, I know Zurin Orb does the exact same thing, but Zurin Orb is played in combo-y things and in a way that Dark Heart of the Wood probably is not, because you have to be in all these different colors, and I just, I don't particularly like Dark Heart of the Wood, despite liking the art. What do we got next? Utram Scientist, not Monitor, so this won't be as good. Utram Scientist is 2 and a blue for a 2/2 artifact creature, Utram Robot Scientist. When this creature enters, you tap up to 1 target creature and put a stun counter on it. That's an exceedingly normal Magic card right there. It is an artifact itself, so it does count towards your artifact count if you need that. tapping a creature down and putting a stun counter on it is fine. At 3 mana, that feels like a lot. You are getting a 2/2 body on the table, though, so it's... I don't know. I guess that's probably about the rate that it needs to be, but it's still not very exciting. I wouldn't put this in a deck because it doesn't... I guess it's some Marie Kondo, doesn't spark joy kind of thing, but like this is... Not only does it not spark joy, I just don't think it really fits with a game plan. Especially when we have something like Cryogen Relic, which is drawing you a bunch of cards and has the ability to also put stun counters on things. That's just a card that does a hell of a lot more than this, and is something that you want to bounce or blink. Where you could blink this, sure, but I probably wouldn't bounce it because I don't want to pay another 3 mana to put this back on the table. So I don't think this is particularly good overall, and I'll go for a 2.5. Pretty average-ass Magic card. Next up, Hover Mirror. I do love Mirror. I really do. They're a great creature type. 2 mana for a 1/2 artifact creature Mirror, flying and vigilance. This is okay. Like these are halfway decent stat lines for a 2 mana artifact creature, so it can go in any deck. Flying vigilance are nice abilities to pair, being that it has some sort of evasion and also is able to stick around on blocks. That can be kind of nice. Take out so this can go on offense. Your opponent who's playing mono blue fairies or something doesn't want to block it because they have a bunch of 1/1 fairies, but then this gets to still stay up on defense, so they can't flip their fairies into ninjas. So that's not bad. It's not particularly good. It's still the French vanilla creature that isn't the best statted thing in the world. I mean, it's pretty good stats for an artifact creature, a colorless artifact creature, but it's not particularly good when you can think of all the other flying creatures that you could cast that would just have a pip or 2 in them. And then those would have much better stats and probably do something more when they come into play. It's okay. Hover Mirror's okay. Great art, but yeah, nothing super special. I think we can give this a 2.6. No, come on. 2.6. 2.5 is like that average Magic card, I think, and we just gave the 2.5 to the scientists. 2.4, I guess. I guess this is slightly under average. Maybe. Anyway, let's keep going. Vampire Aristocrat 2 and a black for a 2/2 Vampire Rogue Noble. You can sacrifice a creature, and this creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. Hey. This isn't bad. Mono black sacrifice. I'm sure you're already thinking about that, and I am too. This comes down. It's a 2-power guy, and he can just, like an ATOG, can sacrifice stuff at instant speed, make itself huge. Both to, it's great as a blocker that can potentially block anything. It's great as an attacker that could potentially trade with anything. If your opponent doesn't block this guy when he swings in, now you can sacrifice a bunch of stuff and hit for a ton of damage on that attack. There's stuff there. We kind of already have a card that does this, and it does it a little cheaper, so we end up playing that more in Mono Black Sacrifice. I forgot the name of it, but it's another vampire that I think it only costs 2 to get on the board, and that one's a little bit better because it's essentially the same out of that. But it is a free sack outlet. It does give +2/+2, which is a good chunk of stats, and being something that you can do instant speed, and it's repeatable. And it works so well on offense and defense. I like this card. It doesn't really crack the mono black sacrifice because there are just slightly more efficient options than this, but it is still a really good card, and I'd be remiss not to give it a 3.4. Yeah, let's go with the 3.4. Let's do one bonus card, shall we? Arcbound Wanderer, 6 mana for a 0/0 artifact creature golem with a modular sunburst. That's 2 keywords they've thrown together. Let's talk about it. This creature enters with a +1/+1 counter on it for each color of mana spent to cast it. That is the sunburst part. And then it also says when it dies, you may put its +1/+1 counters on target artifact creature. That's its modular part. Both of these mechanics were brought in Arcbound, I believe, is from Mirrodin, and then Sunburst specifically came from Fifth Dawn, so that's why this is a Fifth Dawn card. But I believe there are Arcbound creatures in the original Mirrodin. Maybe they didn't show up until Darksteel. Can't remember. I mean, that's when I was first getting into Magic, so I really liked Modular. I kind of liked Sunburst, but Sunburst really wanted you to play a ton of different colors, which felt kind of silly when you were playing a lot of, if you're going in the artifact way, you were probably going more colorless. So it felt really weird to play all these, mana sources that would make different colors. Although if you're just playing a bunch of colorless cards, kind of doesn't matter which lands you have because they all work on them. These aren't Eldrazi that require colorless mana. This can take anything. So I guess you could play a no color / 5 color Mirrodin deck and Mirrodin block deck and do kind of okay with it for the Sunburst. We see some Sunburst cards get played in Pauper these days. When I say some, I mean one. One gets played. It's the Pentad Prism, something like that. It goes in the what does it go in? It goes in the Poison Storm decks because it's you put a couple of counters on it because of the Sunburst, and then you're able to proliferate, and then you can take those counters off to add mana of any color. So it's a good color fixer for a deck that uses a lot of proliferate effects. This guy, though, is not particularly good. You're paying 6 mana, and with the Sunburst, it means this can only get up to a 5/5. Because you can only pay 5 different colors of mana. Colorless is not a color, so they don't count it that way. So this thing could only be a 6 mana 5/5 if you had perfect mana to do that, and you're not always going to have perfect mana to do that. And if you get anything less than a 5/5, it's terrible. And even at 5/5, it's not very good. Now the modular part is interesting, being able to put a couple of those, or being able to put all of those counters onto another artifact creature. It does have to be another artifact creature, though, which is something not a lot of people catch. Or yeah, I'm sure a lot of people catch it, but sometimes that can catch people off guard. I have a whole commander deck that's all about using Arcbound creatures with modular stuff, so I'm very familiar with the rules. And Magic itself is trying to find ways of getting around the idea of modular while still, it wants to have the idea of modular in there, but it doesn't want to have the drawbacks. So you're getting other cards that do kind of this effect, but they wouldn't call it modular. That's all to say, this is not a particularly good card. In Pauper, this is something that would be terrible to put into Monstertron because I guess your Monstertron decks have a decent amount of fixing these days where they could filter some of that mana into different colors to make this thing halfway big. But imagine cascading from your Maelstrom Colossus into this, and because you cast it, but you didn't spend any color of mana to cast it, this would just come in as a 0/0 and die. So not very good for that. It's the same reason you don't play Nyxborn Hydra in traditional Monstertron. There are Tron decks that do play the Nyxborn Hydra, but they are not playing the cascading creatures, because if you cascade into the Hydra, it just comes in as a 0/1, and then that's bad. So you're not doing that with this. That's why this is also not in my Marchesa commander deck, because that has creatures come back from dying, and they'll enter play again. But when they enter play, they didn't have any colors of mana spent to cast them, so they wouldn't get the Sunburst effect, and then they would just keep dying in a loop, and that's not particularly good. Well, I guess they wouldn't die in a loop because they wouldn't have counters on them, state-bait actions, whatever, blah, 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 blah. That part doesn't matter. In Pauper, though, this is not very good, and it's probably not very good anywhere, but especially in Pauper, I think this is just a pretty bad card. It gives me a lot of nostalgia for the parts and pieces that make it up, but it's not, the card itself, I think it's pretty bad. Let's go with a 1.7. Yeah, I think it is kind of really that bad. The modular helps it, because it's, let's say you only get to put 3 counters on this thing, but then this dies and you can put those 3 counters on another artifact creature. So you did kind of get 6 power in there eventually. Still mad. I'm going to keep my same score, and we'll call it a week, and I'll see you next time.